Our interviewee is Vivert Norman. Mr. Norman grew up in Freeport, Illinois. Norman was involved in sports from a very early age. As a teenager, he played basketball for the Civilian Conservation Corps and later the Harlem Globetrotters. Soon after playing with the Harlem Globetrotters, he moved to Waterloo and worked for John Deere. While working at John Deere, he made efforts to eliminate the discriminatory hiring practices by the factory. He was frustrated with the blatant racism and started his own business. After owning several businesses, he worked a few other jobs before getting a job as a security guard at Chamberlain Manufacturing Corporation. While he's working and caring for his family, he was involved with the community organizations such as the YMCA, Red Cross, Antioch Baptist Church, and the Masons. His participation in these organizations fostered his leadership abilities and enabled him to help people locally and abroad. Through his food program, Time of Fast, he helped feed the hungry in Africa. When and where were you born?
I was born in Lawrence, Mississippi in 1916, March 8th.
Reflect back and tell me a memory of growing up as a child in Mississippi.
I never grew up in Mississippi. I left Mississippi when I was 5 months old to Freeport, Illinois.
A family photograph of you, your father,
and all
your
my
mother,
family.
and all your family there in Freeport, Illinois. How old were you in that picture?
I was 10 years old.
10 years old. What's that building that you guys are standing behind?
That building is a little addition to the house we lived in. For my father liked to hunt and that sort of thing, and he used it for cleaning game and various other things, but it eventually turned into a lounge and a restaurant.
You grew up there for the most part?
I grew up in that house. My father got killed in 1927,
okay.
The year after that picture was taken.
Okay, all right.
And my remembrance is that a year or so later, the banks closed and left my mother with 50 cents and 7 kids.
Okay. All right.
And the farmer next to the park, which was Taylor Park, which is still there, they had a son named Fred Sharper, and
okay.
Fred and I were good friends, and I would go over to help him do chores like milking cows and doing other chores, putting up hay and picking vegetables and stuff. And his dad would give me, take those eggs home, Vi, or hey, why don't you do this? Take those such and such. Go get you some apples and or pick some beans and take home with you and stuff like that. And I didn't realize the man was feeding our family until I got about 2 or 3 or 4 years after it happened. And my mother started making dinners for 10 and 15 cents a plate out of the stuff that Fred Shopper would give us.
Okay.
And that's where the restaurant started, and I started to learn to cook from that because she got busy and she'd say, "Help me do so-and-so." I said, "So-and-so's coming." And if you could believe this, those dinners were 25 cents a plate.
25 cents a plate.
Yeah.
That's
common
a bargain.
food, but
that's a bargain.
Yeah, it's a 25. So I still eat that same food: green beans and potatoes and all that kind of stuff.
And so your mother. So this is where you learned to cook from your mother.
I learned to cook from my mother.
From your mother.
And other relatives.
Okay. And other relatives.
Uh-huh.
The restaurant is the key here. This is where you would start.
Yeah, that's where I learned to cook, in that restaurant.
Okay. So I imagine you were cooking up until your teens before you would go away on your own. Let's talk a little bit about as you would make your break from home to a young teenager into CC camp. As a young man, you would go to CC camp. Could you explain for me what is CC camp?
Roosevelt thought of a way to keep the kids off the street, off the road, and he started a conservation corps.
Okay.
And they called it the CCC because of Civilian Conservation Corps was the name of the organization. It was ran by the government, and they gave the boys $1 a day.
$1 a day. Okay, that's a lot
Big
of money. Then. Yeah.
In those days, everybody was getting in because they'd feed you and clothe you and have a place to stay, and you did conservation work such as refurbished parks, and there's parks in this country right now that are used from that 1930s area.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your basketball career. In particular, I know you were you are a former Harlem Globetrotter.
Yes.
Everyone is familiar with them. Tell me how you got involved in that, or what happened? How did you become a Globetrotter? Tell me the story of that.
Well, Globetrotters was coming to Waterloo, out to Freeport, Illinois, to play an exhibition game, but they had to find a team that could compete with them. Mm-hmm. So they knew that the CC camp had a good basketball team, so they asked them to come up and play them.
Okay.
And I wasn't on the team at the time.
Okay.
Because I had left the year before, but I was way bigger than anybody else that was on that team. Uh-huh. They were all like 6'3" and 6'2" and like that, and I was 6'6", and so they played the Globetrotters at Freeport, Illinois, at the VFW club gymnasium. Okay. And beat them. By 2 points.
Okay. All right. Good.
And I was in the stands watching the game.
Okay. All right.
So after the game, I went down mingled with my old friends and that I had played with like 2 or 3 summers and so. Okay. And the guys got to teasing the Globetrotters and said, "Well, if I had been with you, you really got beat." Uh-huh. And they how guys will tease a bunch of other guys. And so he got out and he couldn't play with us because he wasn't in the camp. Captain Clark, his name was, wouldn't let him play with us because he wanted his own boys on the floor. So they kept teasing those guys that way, and they left town. And a couple of days later, they called the Freeport Journal-Standard was the name of the paper there. They called them and asked them could they get a hold of the person that used to play with the CC camp. They didn't know my name, and all they told them was that the guy that played with them broke his thumb.
Okay, this is a guy that's for the Globetrotters.
Yeah, okay, his name was Bruiser.
Okay, all right. Okay. So they're looking for another player.
They're looking for another player to take his place. Okay. Even though I had pretty good coach when I was a kid, I had a fellow by the name of Adolph Rupp. Okay. And if you remember, he was a stellar coach at Kentucky in his later years, well known. But he actually was a high school coach in Freeport, Illinois before he went to University of Kentucky. Okay, all right. and so I had early training in that respect. How
long did you play?
Only played
for the Globetrotters.
Only played from November until March.
I know in Minneapolis you were interviewed. In fact, you were recognized by the owner of the Globetrotters on their local network there for being one of the oldest Globetrotters today.
Yeah. On the court, how has the product changed?
The product has changed because of the fact that in those days you could go above the basket, knock the ball away, and now if a ball is on that's decent, you can't touch it. You could go through the hoop and knock it away. Yeah. They didn't have the three-point shot. They didn't have the jump shooters in those days. There was no three-point circle. Yeah. So the game has changed as far as speed is concerned. There was some fast breaks, but not too many.
Yeah. Do you get a chance to watch these new guys ever?
Yeah, on TV.
Yeah.
They come to the town about 7 miles away from where I'm from. I'm from Waterloo, and they came to Cedar Falls a succession of years. Yeah. But I never had the opportunity to go see them, I think, but once. And that was probably in 1945 or so in that time. The time that Goose Tatum was with him.
Goose Tatum, remember him? Yeah. We should mention you're a tall drink of water. You're sitting down right now. How big a guy are you?
I'm 6'7". In those days, I was quite
Yeah.
the big guy. They called me Bruiser Norman.
I like it.
They didn't use Vivert because it was kind of difficult to say.
Vivert.
Very hard to understand, but it was
right.
a French term, a French name that my father gave me.
Well, we'll call you Bruiser if that's all right. All right. Ethan, you're with the current Globetrotters, the old school, new school. Tell us about what's going on. You're in town, big games next weekend here.
Big games here in Minneapolis, Friday, Saturday at the Target Center.
Yeah.
We're still doing what the Globetrotters have always been known for, traveling around the globe, putting smiles on people's faces and entertaining families year in and year out.
Yeah, you guys are actually part of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame now. How sweet is that? That was a few years ago that happened.
Yeah, 2002 came only the 15 to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. You know, thanks to guys like Vi and and Goose Tatum and Marcus Haynes, those guys, and then the current Globetrotters. Just keep that great tradition going, and we were inducted into the Hall of Fame.
In those days, we traveled on the south, going through the Southwest. It isn't true today, but it's what soured me on traveling with that group. It culminated with a broken foot, but then the stench and riding without taking a shower, taking a bath, and you give you a towel, and they wouldn't let you eat in restaurants in those days. If you wanted to you couldn't sleep in a hotel, because the only hotel we slept in those all the time I was with them was one night in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. We had to go outdoors and slip around the back and take the fire escape and pull it down and climb up the fire escape and take the last 5 rooms, I think it was, in the back of that second floor of that hotel.
Megan, this is because
so
you're talking
nobody
about,
wouldn't know we were there.
This is because you're talking about the 30s. We're talking about the 30s
I'm
here.
talking about 1939.
39.
38. Well, that must have been still 38 when that happened, that I was at this. But I played from 38 to 39.
And so now as a Globetrotter, even though you're an enormous entertainer, being a Globetrotter,
They
you're
were
entertaining, but still yet you encounter a lot of racism.
Well, back
traveling.
they're celebrated now, and they are just like any other celebrated athlete. But back in those days, it was kind of rough.
Was it? It was rough. Okay.
I remember having a real good dinner in Norman, Oklahoma, and you know what the dinner was? Jackrabbit.
Okay.
But we sat down and ate.
Uh-huh.
That's what I think made the meal so good, because we would grab a sandwich and a Coke and go, because that's all they let you, You couldn't go into a restaurant and eat. So when this old lady, I don't remember her name, invited us over to her house for dinner.
Let's talk about Waterloo. Tell me when and why you came to Waterloo.
I came to Waterloo about, I'd say 6 months after I left the Globetrotters.
Okay.
And I got there to work at Deere's. My brother had married there and moved to Deere's because of friends that told him there was jobs available. So when I came home and asked about him, my mother told me, well, he's in Waterloo working. He works at Deere's.
Okay.
So I called him on telephone and told him I was home, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, maybe you can get on up here. Come on up.
To be 18, to be working at John Deere, you were real active in the union.
I was very active in the union, not the first year, but the second year.
The second year.
Which was in 1940.
Was it 838?
Local 838. I helped start 838, and I was on the executive board for the first 4 contracts and helped make the first 4. In fact, I was the chief negotiator.
Well, I know you were a part of the non-discriminating clause, or you worked on that. Tell me,
I made it.
You made it, excuse me. You made the non-discriminating clause. Tell me about that. Why is it important, and how did it come about?
Well, they would hire black people and hire them in the foundry, and that's all.
Okay.
They didn't hire them in any other place. And when those people on the streets were looking for more employees, when they started making more tractors, where they get people off the street and get them in those jobs, and they were cleaner jobs. They weren't, your lungs weren't full of graphite and all that stuff like it was in the foundry. and in the mill room and those places. So, and the jobs paid more.
I believe it's from 1940 to 1946.
I left in 46 because of the discrimination, and they had separate locker rooms where they had about, I imagine there was about 55 or 60 men in that group that I worked around. Okay. And they had 6 spigots and about 30 crowded lockers. Okay. And that was for blacks. Mm-hmm. And then they had another one over about 10 or 15, 20 foot away with a wall between it for whites.
For whites, okay.
And that kind of ticked me off. Mm-hmm. And I worked on that and got that torn down, changed, and then I worked on the upgrading clause. So I did all that.
You got the lockers where they're integrated now.
Oh yeah.
The lockers integrated. They're shared through this non-discriminating clause.
That was the first thing I worked on, was taking that locker room out. Okay. Then the next thing was job bidding.
Job bidding. Tell me about that.
You had to make proficiency on that job at least 2 weeks before they could hire somebody else for it. They would make this guy fail by not giving him the right information, and then they send him back to the foundry.
Ah, okay.
And I found this out, and it just ticked me off so bad that I just left Deere's and I started my own business.
Let's talk about your rug business, please. Tell me a little bit about that and how you got involved in that.
I started that business because of a man by the name of Reed in Cedar Rapids had one.
Cecil Reed.
Cecil Reed, you know of him?
Yes.
I know him real well.
Okay.
Then he branched off, as you remember, and he started janitorial service too.
Okay.
So all those businesses around there, doctors' offices and hospitals and stuff. So I followed his lead and did the same thing. I went from the grocery store to the city to the milkman to Chamberlain's.
The Chamberlain's.
There you go.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Chamberlain's. You working there as a security guard, because that's very, very important.
I worked here 21 years.
21 years at Chamberlain, a security guard. Okay.
During the war, they made ammunition under government contract.
Okay.
And I was in. It was called Chamberlain's here, but the people that owned it was Duchessois.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your volunteer work. 'Cause I know you were very busy in the community, doing a lot of important volunteering. In fact, I want to talk about an article in the Waterloo Courier entitled "Waterloo Wise Man Does His Idea to Be Worldwide on This Day. 15,000 human beings will die of starvation. Who cares?" Tell me a little bit about this article and what's taking place here with this organization you're running.
It's a Wise Men's Club. It's a world service organization of the YMCA. Okay. And we had a world conference in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1972. The world president of the Wise Men's Club was a man by the name of Bob Johnson, insurance man from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, all right.
And he and I had been acquainted because of the Wise Men's Clubs that were in various cities throughout the Middle West. Okay. And we were together in Copenhagen, and they showed pictures of kids starving, flies running in and out of their mouths, and big fat bellies. And I said to him, I said, "Bob, I don't want to see that."
Right.
He said, "Well, why don't you do something about it?"
Okay.
I said, "I'll tell you about it tomorrow." The next morning, I said to him, I said, "Bob," I said, "I thought of something." He said, "What do you mean?" He had forgotten it. I said, "I told you yesterday that I didn't want to see that pictures of those kids starving in Africa and in different places, and you said for me to do something about it." And I said, "Wait till tomorrow." He said, "Yeah, I remember." And he said, "What'd you come up with?" I said, "Time of fast." I didn't know at the time that was going to be called time of fast. Okay. But I told him that, I said, people that eat too much on Thanksgiving should just stop and think. Don't eat one day before Thanksgiving, and give the money that to the YMCA that they would eat that one day.
Okay, all right.
And he said, well, get up and talk about it. And this was, well, I imagine there was an auditorium of about 1,500 to 200 to 2,000 people.
Okay, all right.
From all over the world.
As far as fasting?
Yes.
That was the idea, was to fast for one day.
Yes.
And then you would give the money that you would normally spend to eat
that day
towards the program.
For the program for the kids.
That's great. Okay, that's great.
This, what you saw in the paper, was them giving me an award from Geneva, Switzerland, when they put my name in the World YMCA Hall of Fame.
Ah, okay.
And because of this program, and it's still going on now.
Let's talk about the Red Cross a little bit, because we have another interesting article about your volunteer work with the Red Cross. Well, you're standing there with two other men in this particular article, and above you there's a sign that says Red Cross above it. You're on the board of directors. Is that correct? Give me some examples of some of your duties on the board of directors for the Red Cross.
Well, my duty was administrative more than anything else, even though we helped with, we did a lot of work with people. At that time, there was a lot more fires in Waterloo than there is now. Okay. I don't know why, but various families would get burned out of their homes, and we'd look for shelters and all that sort of. People were still, a lot of people would come up destitute and come to the Red Cross for food and stuff like that. So we kept in touch with places where we could send them to, and that was. We did did a lot of giveaway programs, clothing and winter clothing, and they still carry on those programs, but they're not as prominent as there's not as many people wanting that.
With the Red Cross, but you're working in a different capacity. In this article, you're cooking for the volunteers. I think it's a banquet honoring the volunteers, and you're involved in that.
Board of directors had a breakfast every year. Okay, all right. And I prepared the breakfast for them, sausages and pancakes.
Tell me about the wild game dinner, the fundraiser that you would cook for Antioch Baptist Church. What was going on there?
We were trying to build a new church, and we had my brother was a choir director, and they were trying to make their budget, because I said I wasn't going to cook when I come to Waterloo. I thought that was the end of my road as far as cooking was concerned, but he told them, let's have a banquet. He said, banquet? Who's going to cook a banquet? Oh, my brother's a good cook. And I said, hey, you ain't supposed to be talking like that. And then from fixing a couple of banquets for the church, and I got enthusiastic about it too. And I said, why don't you really have a good wild game dinner? Okay. And I started doing the rabbit and the coon and the beaver and the bear, deer, pheasant, duck, goose, buffalo, partridge, quail.
You cooked it all.
All these people bring this stuff voluntarily.
They're bringing it in for you.
Free. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. We didn't pay for this.
So you can handle this.
Donate it.
You can handle this, right?
Oh yeah. I knew how to cook all of them.
Okay. Yeah. This is impressive. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as a cook, you've done a lot of things with the cooking and the volunteering with the Red Cross and with the YMCA. You've done some great things as far as, and there's some other things too that you've done as far as volunteer work within the community. Let's talk about your involvement with the Masons and the Shriners, and how did you get involved with the Masons?
Well, my dad was a Mason.
Okay.
And his dad was a Mason. And they used to say the cotton, you've heard the words, the Cotton Field Lodge was a little cabin out behind because in those days they didn't want you to meet as a group. So in the South, you have to slip away someplace and have a meeting place, and they would go into the cotton fields and build a little shelter out there and have a meeting. But I started out being a mason here in Waterloo in 1945, and I got to be Deputy Grand Master of the state of Iowa.
Okay.
And because of my work ethic and trying to raise a family and buy a home and stuff like that, I didn't try to get any further than that.
Okay, right.
But then about 1948, I joined the consistory,
Okay.
which is 32nd degree Masons, and in this organization there, and
That's the
for
ring. That's the ring.
1976.
That's a ring from your.
This is from the 33rd degree Masons.
Okay. All
You
right.
can't wear but one ring at a time.
Okay.
So this is the highest one.
I noticed you have a belt on. It looks like
It's a Masonic belt too.
you have a Masonic belt on as well. Okay. All right.
But in 1976, I was elected to the Supreme Council, and that's the
Okay.
33rd degree. And in the meantime, I had joined Shrindom because I had been a little more successful in being able to pay dues to various organizations.
Okay.
And I thought it would be fun and entertaining, and there was a step up in the lodge.
Absolutely.
And I got to be well known all over the United States plus Europe and the world,
Yeah,
because I became the chairman of the. I had the first international golf tournament. I started that program in Shrine.
Okay.
I was the first master of ceremonies for the Shrine Talent and Scholarship Program.
Okay.
I did all the mileage and per diem for the patrol teams,
Okay. All right.
and I did all of the computations for all of them.
You obviously contribute to the community in a very positive way as a business owner, and I know you've influenced a lot of people just with your presence alone. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for sharing your story
we just
with me.
touched the surface.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.